Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today I have my good friend Ren. He is a growth marketer at Eclipse, and then I've got Terry as well. So we've got a two-headed thing. We're going to be talking all about go-to-market strategy, all about Eclipse, all about a bunch of things. But real quick, give us a brief introduction. I'll start with you, Terry. Tell us how you got into this Web3 space and then how you got to be working at Eclipse.
Yeah, for sure. I got into crypto late 2020, early 2021. I had a friend. He plays, I want to say like almost every game that's ever released. And he was like, yo, there's this crazy game where it is actually legal, according to the game TOS, to trade in-game assets as well as currencies that are created by the characters. And at that time, that was Axie Infinity. And, like both him and I, we had done a lot of trading on RuneScape. We'd done a lot of real world trading, like buying and selling GP. And so this made a lot of intuitive sense. And that's kind of how I got into the space. I ended up writing a lot about crypto games. And then suddenly 1KX, an early stage VC, was like, hey, want to come work for us? That was, I believe, something like 3.5 years ago. Did 2.5 years at 1KX. Interestingly, investing in infrastructure, ZK, and scalability, kind of unrelated to kind of the reason why I got into this space. And then I joined Eclipse about 7 or 8 months ago now. Because according to all the research I was doing, I believe that Eclipse, and I still do believe that Eclipse is kind of at the interesting intersection behind a lot of the advancements in scalability technology.
Awesome. And people are interested in 1KX, they can go back to the 1KX episode. Then Ren, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into working for Eclipse.
Yeah, I got into crypto just from a friend in university saying like, hey, Ren, you should go trade crypto. You can make a lot of money. Obviously, like everyone else, started trading on FTX, had like some ridiculous volume numbers that I should not have at that age, blew up my account. At some point I was like, okay, like I'm trading this stuff, but like, I don't know what is going on, like I should go and read the Bitcoin white paper. So obviously when I read the Bitcoin white paper, I think like the holy shit moment for me was learning about Aave flash loans. That was like a completely new DeFi primitive that's just not possible in like the traditional financial system. Got my first role at a crypto hedge fund as a trader, just managing sort of like on-chain yield farming strategies. Did that for a bit. Eventually, like wasn't that interested in the finance side of things. So when I joined Blockworks Research, doing research for roughly 1.5 years, researched everything from MEV to DeepIn to cross-chain messaging infra to oracles to DeFi, kind of like just all over the place. At some point, I was like, okay, like researching is fun, but I kind of want to go build a company, right? So I went to look out there at the state of the market, like what was a genuinely interesting company that I could join where I could sort of interact with like a lot of stakeholders. It will be a very multifaceted role. But also I like fundamentally believed from like a thesis perspective, right? And I think Eclipse was that company.
Yeah, absolutely. And because we mentioned Eclipse a few times, I'll pass it over to Terry to give us a brief introduction into like what is Eclipse, what does it bring to the market, and then I'll shoot it over to you, Ren, to add in some additional color.
All right, what is Eclipse? Eclipse is building Solana on Ethereum. What does that technically mean? We are the first SVM L2 on Ethereum. To date, most of the L2s that you interact with are EVM L2s. They're Ethereum equivalent, or at least Ethereum compatible. Sometimes they might have a little bit of a tweak in order to become more ZK proving friendly. But we are saying, you are in a modular world where you are stitching together different aspects of blockchain design and different types of infrastructure providers to create something new, to create a new execution environment. Then, most people have said, okay, in such a world, why don't I recreate what is exactly available on Ethereum except cheaper? But for us, we're saying, well, why don't we think a step further ahead and kind of look around the world and see, okay, what is the best settlement layer? What is the best DA layer? And what is the best execution layer? And then patch those together and then build them in a way such that you take advantage of the fact that you are in a modular world, such that you are an L2, therefore you can increase performance, you can decrease costs, better than an L1. And yeah, like that's kind of the thesis and the birth story of Eclipse.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done a lot of episodes on the modular thesis, but yeah, it's essentially we can split this apart. People can go back to the Avail episode if they want to learn more about data availability. They can go back to many different episodes if they want to learn about the modular thesis. But Ren, talk to us a little bit about like what Eclipse specifically brings to the market that it feels really enticing to developers and to users.
Yeah. So obviously for one component, I could harp all day about like sort of the performance benefits, increased throughput, sort of lower costs. But I think ultimately what it represents for developers, especially Solana developers, is a completely different market opportunity to the one on Solana, right? There's kind of two classes of Solana applications today. The first is like big blue chip established. Say you're Orca, you're dominating majors volume on Solana. Your growth on Solana is limited by the growth of Solana, the chain itself in terms of like users or the price of Sol and like Sol native assets itself, right? You've kind of hit like this natural like growth ceiling. You're like, okay, I want a bigger market. I want to expand my sort of total revenue opportunity. What do I do? Eclipse is kind of that answer, right? We're allowing applications to access Ethereum's user base, access Ethereum's liquidity base and assets, so that in the ideal world, like Orca's dominating like ETH and ETH based asset trading instead of Uniswap, right? And they've gone from like my growth, which is like doing really well on Solana, but I've enabled this whole new market opportunity for myself. It's kind of moving from like a local regional business to this like a completely different like country and like expanding my business internationally, right? For a smaller Solana app, say you just want a hackathon, you're still trying to find product market fit. Eclipse is simply an opportunity to gain like additional distribution. If you're a game that uses Sol as sort of like this playing fee or betting fee, if you're a gambling app that uses like Sol as a denomination, there's likely an entire class of Ethereum users that are also interested in your app, but they don't want to sell the ETH. They don't want to sell the ETH. They want to interact with your application, this product with ETH instead of Sol. And Eclipse is basically an opportunity to do that. I think that's what Eclipse represents to both users and like application builders.
So is it like, hey, you guys have aspirations to build a high throughput app, something that's not going to be bogged down by maybe some of the speed or performance issues that exist on Ethereum, and in addition, you can build this high performance app and get access to all of the like locked up liquidity in Ethereum? Is that kind of just like a general idea?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. If you look at like sort of the existing landscape of Ethereum and EVM, right? It's like fairly constrained in terms of throughput. Base is probably at 150 TPS. They have 6x like their block space in the past 3 months or so, and yet their median fees have still gone from 0.002 cents to 0.2 cents. Or sorry, it's basically like 10x in the past month due to the whole like sort of like AI agent plus meme coin mania. At a certain point, like that is not scalable, or like that point has already been hit, right? Like median fees should not go 10x just because like one application or one specific asset is sort of like saturating the entire block space. And the Solana virtual machine basically brings an additional level of scalability through parallel execution and local free markets, which is live today, to Ethereum. So it's both like it will enable this new class of apps that weren't possible before from like a creativity, what you can build on chain perspective, but also like it allows existing apps to just simply scale a lot better and an order of magnitude more.
Let me elaborate a bit here, right?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people are going to say, well, yeah, the SVM doesn't have perfect local fee markets, as in like there isn't a way you can proportionally pay for additional priority in order to have strict earlier inclusion. But what matters the most is that when you actually look at the observed numbers, you do see there is a divergence between the average and the median fee. Now, let me explain what that means. The average fee is highly affected by the top, X% of transactions that pay significant priority fees for fast inclusion because there is a fleeting opportunity in which they must capture the opportunity now. An example is, imagine that you observe that there is an arbitrage trade between DEX A and a centralized exchange, or DEX A and DEX B, and you want to capture this opportunity today. Now, the marginal value of the TX inclusion fee that you will pay is at the cost or at the level or near the level of profit that you will make by getting that trade included and winning the block or winning the top of the block. What that does is that significantly influences the average fees paid, because the more there are these highly opportunistic profit generating contentious opportunities, the more there are, say, professional traders who are like, okay, we're going to pay a ton of money in order to access this before anyone else. So that spikes up the average fee. Solana is the only chain today, live today, where there is a complete decorrelation between the average fee and the median fee. Now, the median fee is kind of like when you and I access the chain and we're about to send each other USDC, that's how much the fees we pay. Now, think from a perspective of an application, right? If you have an application, your revenue depends on your users accessing your state. And if your users have a marginal propensity to spend, that is, say, 20 cents, but some unrelated contentious activity happens on your chain and pushes up the fee, the median fee to use your application over the marginal propensity of your users to spend, that means your revenue is going to churn, right? And so EVM L2s and EVM L1s, or like any EVM in general, has this problem where another application can affect the revenue and the profits as well as the user base of your application. Now that is kind of like in a business setting, that's completely unthinkable. Like imagine the more people go into the hairdresser down the street, suddenly, my pharmaceutical business is making less money. It's nonsensical. And so if you really wanted to scale to an environment where multiple things can coexist, it is really important that you have a lot of scalability, a lot of throughput. But also it is important that you have empirically observed local fee markets, which is the divergence between the average and the median fee. I mean, there's one more thing that you need in order to have incentive compatibility and dApps all coexisting in one chain. But those are kind of the two first of the three elements.
And we've talked a lot about kind of the existing, we'll say L2 infrastructure. We didn't necessarily name Arbitrum, but obviously we talked about Base. Talk to us a little bit about maybe listeners have heard the Monad episode, or maybe they're looking at something like Mega ETH. How do you guys kind of differentiate yourself from those, maybe we'll say new incumbents? I know you guys are live on mainnet, so obviously right there's a differentiator, but talk to us a little bit about some of these super high performance compatible EVM solutions that are coming.
Yeah, I mean, those issues I talked about with global fee markets, as in the correlation between the average fee and the median fee, that is an issue for any EVM. No matter how high the throughput, if there is sufficient transaction demand, they will undergo the exact same issues. Now, the other part where we're thinking about this kind of third secret sauce in order to have an incentive compatible, one single state machine, is you need to have transaction fees that are redistributed back to the dApps. Now, think about it like this. If you're a dApp, people pay to access transaction state or state that you generate, right? You're a dApp, you created something interesting, or you created infrastructure that's interesting for people to trade tokens. And because you created this, there are people who are willing to pay high transaction fees on a chain in order to transact on the chain, in order to access the contracts that you've written. But for some reason, that money goes to the validators as well as searchers. Now, that to me seems a little weird. It's like saying, okay, yeah, you as a company created this innovation, but a lot of the more money goes to some middleman or people who are completely unrelated to you in the transaction supply chain. I think that a lot of people have observed this, and a lot of applications are expressly saying that this is not a sustainable business model for them, right? So for example, Uniswap is moving to Unichain, which allows them to own end-to-end the MEV supply chain, as well as the value capture mechanism, right? Of both the validator as well as the searcher, the validator as well as the application. And so as that happens with more and more apps, we are going to see that chains not only, number one, need high throughput in order to support a lot of apps on their chain. Number two, need local fee markets or empirically observe local fee markets in order to make sure that one app doing well doesn't affect another. But also, they need to make sure that they actually give apps their fair share of the money that they generate. And this is kind of the three-prong kind of steps in order to have, if you want to have a single state machine that is incentive compatible, that keeps all the apps on one chain, you need all three of these. And that's kind of how, or at least I'm not sure if any of these other teams are thinking about it, but we're thinking about it, before any of these other teams are thinking about it.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind, and this is just Solana in general, when we were talking with the Pith team, they talked about how they actually had to fork Solana at a certain point because they would have taken up most of the available block space just because I guess they run such high transactions. Do you see any issues with Solana's ability to scale for maybe these super apps or these apps that have really require super high throughput? But I guess on the contra, HiveMapper uses Solana, I believe. So talk to us a little bit about some of the scalability things on Solana.
Well, we haven't seen it in practice, right? We have not necessarily seen that blocks in Solana are completely full. What we have seen is there have been, portions of the transaction supply chain in which transactions were dropped and leaders were kind of block creators were overwhelmed because of various spam issues. That is being worked on Solana's side with things like Fire Dancer, but also networking layer improvements. And there's a lot of things that were revealed at Breakpoint around how to make the networking stack more robust that I'm not sure are public yet, but there is a lot of work going on in increasing scalability on the Solana end. Now, what that is beneficial for us is all these kind of hardware innovations as well as hardware software co-design innovations that are happening on the Solana level, we can take and we can then throw additional resources at this, right? Because at the end of the day, Solana is an L1. You have to have thousands, I believe they have thousands of separate validators, and these are all distinct entities running these validators, and you have to have the transaction demand as well as the transaction fees plus the inflation to be able to actually compensate all these disparate operators for the hardware level that they're operating at, as well as the cost to operate these nodes. Now, we don't have that problem, right? We have 4 sequencers, so the kind of overall cost to the network goes down. What that means is you can then increase the cost of operation. And what that means then is, of course, you can have fancier hardware, or you can add additional memory, you can try all these different things, you can have more sophisticated FPGAs and this verification timeline, and we can try all these things. We can take all these innovations that are being done on Solana and then bring them to Eclipse, and then use the fact that we're in L2 and kind of a bit of centralization of affordances because of the fact that we're in L2 in order to see if we can push TPS another order of magnitude. Now, we don't know yet. We just don't know until we've actually tried it and we've pushed it to prod, and there's some application that is actually pushing these limits, but that's our plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are interested on some of those things that were discussed at Breakpoint. They can go back to Nick's episode from the Solana Foundation. So I want to pass it over to Ren, because something I've been very excited about and interested is your guys' yapping on Twitter and the kind of the go-to-market strategy. So talk to us a little bit. It's all well and good to have these technical things, but we know just build it and they'll come is not really something that works. So talk to us a little bit about how you guys are actually getting this in front of users, developers, and bringing people on the platform.
Yeah, I think those are kind of 3 separate audiences. I'll just talk about the yapping strategy first. It's always really funny when people come to us and chat with our growth team, and they're like, "Oh, I've been seeing you guys on Twitter. How do you guys do this?" They think we have some insane gigabrain master plan, when reality is not as complicated as that. It's simply us telling the team okay, obviously everyone in crypto knows this, right? Mindshare attention is basically the game that you are playing, and at some point we're okay, it's a team effort. Probably just the founder himself isn't just cutting it anymore in terms of this because if you look at most of the past projects, they have sort of one key leader, which is known as the Twitter guy. Is omnipresent all the time and just replying to everything. We're what if we just went a step beyond that and just made the whole team do it, right? So there's 2 components to that, right? First of all, it's just kickstarting it, because everyone's busy, not everyone has time to just tweet the whole day, and making sure we set the sort of infrastructure in place, so that hey, we ask people what topic are you tweeting about this week? What is this sort of general high level topics that you all want to champion and talk about together? And that's basically it, right? We just ask people what are you tweeting about this week? Did you tweet about the stuff that you were going to tweet about last week? The second thing that we've started doing more of is that everyone on the team has very, very deep domain expertise, right? So for example, Terry, he was an investor at 1KX for 2.5, 3 years. He has a lot of deep expertise in infrastructure, gaming, sort of fundraising. And so he's been tweeting a lot about that stuff. Nate, our head of growth and marketing, used to be head of marketing at DYDX. He has a whole host of experience about sort of Web2 marketing, Web3 marketing, how to play the attention game, talking about our mascot, Turbo the Cow. And so he's been tweeting specifically about that stuff. He's put out a few fantastic articles that have gotten really good reception. Same applies for ecosystem people. Same applies for BD people. Everyone talks about their own niche on top of just general things that people expect us to tweet about, and just in general being champions of our ecosystem, our community, right? The similar thing goes for our community. we've started this trend of like ENFTs, EKOLs. The E stands for Eclipse. And so our community may not be as big as others, but I think it's probably one of like the loudest communities out there. These guys are so, I don't want to say annoying, but God, they are like omnipresent on Twitter. Like half of them like reply to my tweets instantly. They champion all of the ecosystem projects. And I think that was like a lot of like very intentional decisions that we made throughout the history of Eclipse, like not doing like sort of lower effort solutions to boost Twitter followers, not doing like simple Galaxy quests. And it really was about building like a fun environment outside of our product, right? Where users are like, okay, I'm here to have fun. I'm not here to write tweets and threads. I'm not here to draw like endless fan art. Like, obviously I love that. Obviously I love if everyone was a champion of our ecosystem, but you know what? Like, people want to have fun. We get that, and that's the type of environment that we want to build. And like most importantly, it has to be supportive and like sort of like trust, right? Trust is the one thing that you cannot buy like really quickly with any amount of money or any amount of time. That has to be built up over time. And so that sort of like the core ethos of a lot of what we do. For developers, I think it's still a very personal thing, like I can't just blast on Twitter, hey, like come build on Eclipse. This is like ABC why you should build on Eclipse. It's getting to know these developers, getting to know like what's the product they're working on. How can we enable something specifically for them that probably no one else can do for them? And how can we support them if they do choose to build on Eclipse, right? So these are just long-term relationships and long-term games that we play with developers. And yeah, it's probably the same for a lot of ecosystems, the combination of like conferences, outreach, inbound. But I think for us, we want to make sure that we play long-term games with everyone that like comes into our ecosystem, and we make it very clear like what the benefits are for you, right? And that we will become and continue to be champions of your protocol basically forever, and try to help you find product market fit and success.
Yeah, I want to go deeper into the apping strategy because we interview so many founders on here that have absolutely struggled to build any sort of like marketing or brand, and I feel like you guys have a very cohesive, like all the PFPs have this like a lime green background, which and did you essentially select, be like, hey, Terry, you talk about infrastructure, you talk about this, you talk about that, and like there's a certain KPI, like Terry has to do like 10 outbound replies a day. Like talk to us, is it this tactical, or is it just like, Terry, we just need you to be more vocal?
Not tactical at all. We didn't tell Terry like if you don't tweet like 10 times a day, we're gonna fire you, not tactical at all. We just say like, do what you like. Everyone has their own tweeting style. I don't want to force you to be like a shit poster when you are very clearly not a shit poster. So for example, our CEO, right? VJ, this guy has like 10 years of experience, ex-Uniswap, DYDX, Ripple. Like he's not a shit poster. He's like a very calm, mature guy, huge amount of like business insight. And so we're not going to go VJ, like start shit posting like every other like 20-year-old founder that just yaps on Twitter like the entire day about the most random things and plays the attention game, right? Like be the calm leader that you are. And that general principle applied to everyone on the team, talk about what you can talk about, share insight and share value where you can, and just like keep your own like Twitter style. It wasn't very like formulaic in any sense.
Yeah, and I know you guys are. I think it's. Tell me the amount of dApps you guys have. Is it 60 on mainnet, or talk to us about how, like, I guess from looking back, like how you guys were able to get that quantity of developers, because we see a lot of like ghost chains out in the ecosystem. It seems like L2 does an airdrop, and then it's like, well, 2 months later, what's really built there? So talk to us a little bit about like how you sustainably kept people and attracted them.
I think attracting them is just like, if I decide to build on your chain, right, it is a very big business decision that I do think some dApps like take a little too lightly from time to time. It is like probably one of the most important decisions that you will make as a builder, like what chain to build on, because at times it can decide like whether your app lives or dies, right? So we recognize that it's a bet, and we basically try to like rationalize why, if you deploy on Eclipse, that bet makes sense for you, right? Whether that's a greenfield ecosystem where you don't have as much competition, you can make sort of like a name for yourself and become a vertical category leader and tap into sort of like our tiny community of, say, more than like 150,000 people on Discord. Or, for example, if you look at like the orcas, the saves, like I think the value proposition was pretty clear to them too. Like if you come to Eclipse today, you've hit your growth ceiling on Solana. You're constrained by the rate of growth on Solana. Why not just like give it a shot? It's not like a huge difference in sort of like the developer environment between Solana and Eclipse. In the simplest case, it's taking your contract, deploying it on Eclipse, changing the RPC, right? And so I think that is sort of like the clear like why developers first onboarded onto Eclipse, right? And then the second part like is keeping them on Eclipse, right? Because obviously there are like God knows how many chains launching like every quarter or even every month, and some of these teams do they are fairly like jump around, collect grants, like they just like continuously like play this game of like hot potato, and I think we just continue to drive value, whether that's fundraising, marketing, learning how to build community. Like it's sort of like the give a man a fish and like you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and like you sort of like feed him for his entire life. That is what we do at a very core level, right? Whether it's like strategy or like product or UX. So for example, every single app that deploys on Eclipse, like everyone on the team uses the app, probably combined across the team, we'll do like 20 hours minimum of like UX testing, and we'll just give you like an essay on like here are all of the bullet points that you should fix for your app to drive the best user experience possible. Similar thing on marketing, right? We drop sort of like tweet ideas for founders like, hey, if you are this meme coin launchpad, this is what you should talk about. You should talk about your differentiated features. You should talk about any traction that you're launching. If you are a sort of on-chain game, you should try to position yourself this way. You should talk about like this interesting mechanism of your game. And we do that for every single protocol. So it's like these really small, like nitty gritty, like customized like value that we give to teams that I think keeps them in the ecosystem. Right? Because nowadays it's like too boilerplate across every ecosystem. If we talk to like basically every BD or ecosystem team and ask them like, oh, why should I build on your chain? 90 to 95% of the time, the answer is always like, oh yeah, like we'll support you with co-marketing, we'll help you grow, we'll gain you access to our distribution. And I'm like, that is like the bare minimum that ecosystems should be doing today. Like that should not impress any builder out there anymore.
So let's say I'm launching Jax protocol. Let's say it's going to be some clone of Aave. I decide to launch on Eclipse, and you guys are going to use my app. I get a Terry length essay about all of the things I'm doing wrong. So is that generally like the advice is like, hey, we're going to really help you guys not only scale the app because you might have run out of say liquidity or growth on Solana, but we're also going to really help you make it a much better experience. Do you see any issue with that kind of model? Maybe it can only scale for a set amount of dApps, or maybe you have competitive dApps and people are like, whoa, I don't want Terry's essay being applied to my competitor.
So definitely, right? Like at some point, like this doesn't scale, but we do have the luxury. Yeah, do things that don't scale, that famous quote. We do have the luxury of not running into that capacity constraint nowadays. Another thing that you mentioned, like not giving Terry's essay to someone else. Like when I chat with like potential teams that want to build in Eclipse, I actually tell them really transparently, like if you are a meme coin launchpad, I have like XYZ meme coin launchpads that are already live on Eclipse, these more that are launching. Here are the features, like if you did like sort of want to come in and see this as an opportunity for yourself, I think this is what you should do. Because like the last thing I want to do is like try to like buy an ecosystem app, buy the goodwill, and then like they find out that they have like 5 competitors on the ecosystem when they thought they were launching into a greenfield opportunity. That's just unfair for a developer. And so I'm not really worried in terms of like us helping every single team, both from a capacity constraint perspective, or for example, like I don't want to like only give this team value and I don't want to leak this exact same strategy to the other team. Like just because no team is the same. Everyone's product has like slight quirks. Every team's founders is like slightly different. So we do always have ways to drive like unique and differentiated value to every single one of the teams. Obviously, there's some like top level principles that help all of the teams, but by and large, like there's still a lot of customized and personal value that we deliver.
Absolutely. And one thing I like to ask all the guests, and either of you can jump in on this, is for a startup idea, do you feel like there's an area of the Eclipse ecosystem where you're like, you know what, I'm very surprised people haven't done X, Y, Z, or like it could even just be outside of Eclipse in general. Like we're always looking for, builders to get ideas on what they can build if they have some, idle talent.
Yeah, I'll go first. I think one thing that I haven't seen as much of that I'm a little surprised by is like SocialFi. Like you kind of saw this towards like the depths of the bear market or the tail end of the previous bear market, like social trading, copy trading. Like trading is inherently a social experience. I think you see that through sort of like TikTok content about like XRP price targets, pump fund live streams. There's inherently like a social real time sort of element to trading. So I'm surprised like not a lot more people have built SocialFi trading protocols. Whether that's like putting users against each other, opening up more sort of like P&L opportunities by hosting like trading competitions. There's actually one protocol that's going to launch on Eclipse called Quantro that's kind of sits at like this very interesting intersection between like SocialFi, sort of like trading competitions and meme coin. Basically, they'll put like multiple players in one like sort of like trading competition. You trade on a 1 minute P&L time frame. Everyone has like a play-in fee. And then if you have the highest P&L, you win the play-in fee of everyone else. So, if you outperform, you get 100x basically in like 1 minute. These type of apps, I think, are underexplored, at least for this cycle. So those would be the type that I like to see.
Yeah, like a TikTok shop for crypto. That'd be kind of funny.
Yeah.
And then Terry, you have one?
Yeah, I totally agree. Personally, I still play fantasy. I find it extremely addicting. I was also an early user of Frentech. I think another type of app that I've been seeing a lot more of is it's kind of like deepened to encourage some action to be taken because data collection for that action is very difficult, right? So I think the very first thing we've seen is there is a application on Solana that encourages people to take photos of their stool because apparently stool data is very, very difficult to collect and there is not a lot of it. And so by encouraging them to do it via a gamified interface and tokens, literally shit to earn, they can collect significantly more stool data than is publicly available. Another thing I've heard is that if you want to train like human-like robots, you need millions of hours of video data of people doing some repetitive task. But that is not available on the internet today, apparently. Like there is no millions of hours of me, I don't know, like flipping a pan, like flipping an omelet in a pan. And so I've heard of some startups where people are encouraging, people to take videos and upload them and rewarding them with crypto tokens as well as a gamified experience. And in return, building up that kind of like rich repository of data that is then used to train humanoid robots. I think these are kind of interesting ways in which Web2 people have asked me or my friends or my investor friends, like, hey, we need something like this to come out of crypto. And like that has never happened to me before where someone was like, hey, we need something like this to come out of crypto. But that is happening in relation to kind of like these new type of, it's very hard human thing and behavior to get and encourage, but it is so beneficial if we have a lot of it. So let's incentivize people to do it. And then once we have a lot of it, it will be valuable enough such that it is a network, right? And that is kind of the fundamental, if you remember the Chris Dixon graph, it's kind of the fundamental thesis about bootstrapping token networks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, people can go back to the Hive Mapper episode because I feel like that's probably a good example of like the incentivization. Now, one of the tricky things is they actually had to make their own like dash cameras. So hardware is hard at the end of the day. So I'd say if you don't have proficiency in that, maybe like stick with something people can just shoot on their Android or iPhone. And then people can also go to the podcast I do for Zero Gravity. You can hear all about like building bespoke data sets for, or like we'll call them niche data sets for AI models, because people think there's just like all this data out there, and there is, but there's not data on like flipping an omelet. Like if people want to know how to make a bad omelet, maybe I can film some videos, but maybe that wouldn't be so good for the robot. Okay, so finally, you guys have been super respectful of your time. Talk to us a little bit about some of the upcoming milestones, where people can get involved with you both.
Yeah. Honestly, like P0 is ensuring applications are successful on Eclipse, right? There is no more important like milestone than that. you can use like a variety of different metrics, whether that's like TVL, user activity, transactions, volume, but every app is different, and we want every app to succeed as much as possible on Eclipse. So that is the next big milestone. The best aha moment, will be like, for example, we have like realized demand and realized throughput that is more than the entire like Ethereum and all of the EVM L2s combined. We cross, say, like in an ideal world, 10 billion in TVL at some point of time. But yeah, like that is the next big milestone, right? And I wouldn't count it as like a milestone. It's like a long-term effort that we owe to each and every one of the builders that like chose to bet on Eclipse.
Perfect.
It's great answer.
And then finally, talk to us where they can find out more about Eclipse, find out more about you both. Yeah, shout out your Twitters.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about Eclipse, you can go check out our website, eclipse.xyz. You can go follow our Twitter, EclipseFND, and you can also find our Discord link on our Twitter page. My Twitter, if you want to sort of like DM me, DMs are always open, is purplepill3m. And then Terry's is 0x Ho. But if you don't know how to spell that, just go to the Eclipse page, and then it's following all of the team members. All of our DMs are always open, so feel free to DM us anytime.
Absolutely, and I'll definitely put Terry and your username in there. Terry's being one of, I'd say, the tougher to spell, but we will go to the description. And for everyone, let's continue building the future of Web3.